Hey, welcome back to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Martin. Got a very interesting guest with us today. So he's a fighter pilot. He's a civilian and military instructor pilot. He's had multiple businesses. He's an Amazon bestseller. He's got a new book coming out. Oh, and along the way, he's a husband. He's got 4 kids. Hey, Dominic Teich, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Oh, absolutely. And some people call him Slice. We'll get into that later. But for right now, his last name is pronounced Teich. Don't mess it up, all right? All right, so here's what we're going to talk about. So let's go back to the beginning because when did you first know, hey, I want to be a pilot?
I don't know the very specific day, but what I do remember is on my seventh birthday, my old man and I built a little F4 fighter jet model, and that was a day where I thought that airplanes and flying was most likely in my future.
That's cool. And there's a lot of paths to get to become a pilot. What was your direct path? How did you become a pilot?
It was not at all a direct path, not even close. So, I've even written about on one of my blogs, like people like to zig and zag, right? So if the shortest distance from A to B is a straight line, my life has never taken a straight line. So, I went about it in probably a pretty roundabout way. At 7, we built the airplane. At 12, my uncle took me to the flight deck of a big airliner while they were doing engine runs, and I was like, "This is pretty sweet." My uncle was a mechanic, so at 16, I signed up to be a aviation mechanic, and then in the same year, I got introduced to the flight school. I started flying, and I dropped out of aviation mechanic school. And then at 18, I got picked up to be a civilian flight instructor. So while I was going to college, I was teaching people how to fly, which was great because I never made more than $11,000 a year before joining the military. So I would buy uh, bean burritos from like the local shack and tell them to hold the cheese because I couldn't afford it, and I'd cut them in half
Oh, I don't have
and
cheese,
then
my
put
man.
them
Hold
in.
that cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, hold that cheese and put half the burrito in the fridge, eat half today, and then I had lunch for the following day. So I was scraping, but it was a good time. It helps you realize all of the important things in life. So yeah, at 18, I started civilian flight instruction. And then, as I turned 20, 21, I had gotten enough hours where I applied for the airlines and the military. Military picked me up the same time the airlines did, and I just gave the military a go. They lost my paperwork 3 times, so I got to go through the interview process and the paper submitting and all of that stuff 3 times. So by the third time, I gotten pretty good at it, and then went through officer training school, and went through undergraduate pilot training in the military, and then competed to get a fighter jet, and the rest is history.
Wow. That's awesome. That's actually really good training to become an entrepreneur, actually, right? That where you're all over the place, lots of ups and downs and all over the place. You've got a unique perspective on that. And we'll also get into that later. So you're a civilian pilot, Air Force pilot. Can you take us kind of through the similarities as well as the differences in the training and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I kind of lucked out. I went through a civilian college that had a syllabus, for flying. In the civilian world, you can take flight lessons um, as a regular Joe, no pun intended, but like you can go down to the local flight school and you can just, get your private pilot license, all that kind of stuff. Well, I went through a college that had a syllabus and it was very structured, which I think is good because it kind of kept me on a timeline. And that's something that like I can hear it in your voice as like a peak performer, right? You want to get somewhere. You can get really frustrated if if you don't really know where you are in that timeline, and you don't know where that outcome you don't know when to expect that outcome. So I think for me, if I was to give anybody uh, like a what should I do in the civilian world if I wanted to fly, I would go to what's called a Part 141 school, and that's more than you want to know, but they have essentially a structured program, especially if you're a go-getter. If you're more laid back and you just want to fly for fun, a Part 61 school where you go fly with an instructor and eventually get your pilot license. But for me, that was a huge benefit, and I noticed the military did a lot of the same things. It was very structured. You knew where you were in the syllabus. You knew when you busted a ride and what that meant, and you had to go back and try it again. You knew how many busts that you could have before you were now facing maybe getting eliminated. So it was very structured, and I need some structure in my life. I need a calendar. I need to know where I'm going, and more importantly, I need to know when I'm going to stop. So I actually even now, because we're so busy with two businesses and a full-time fighter pilot job, and like you mentioned, I got 4 kids and life. I even schedule days where it's kind of a nothing day. So I just kind of roll with the punches that day. For your listeners, Joe, I really appreciated that we had actually canceled the first date to record this podcast because you said you're doing something with your kids, right?
Yeah, but someone with my
Yeah.
son, we were going somewhere over the
And I
weekend.
was
Yeah.
like, you sent me that email, and I was getting ready to do something with my kids, go hiking and be outside. And you sent me that email, and it saved face for me. And then I was like, I'm definitely going to get on this podcast with this guy because he's prioritizing family, and that's so important. But back to your question, the Air Force versus civilian training is very, at least in the college that I went through and that I was instructing, it was very structured, and I think that's important, especially when you're teaching your brain how to learn things. The military, one thing that I thought the military did much better, and this is more of maybe a cultural thing, especially fighter pilots, is the debrief portion of the flight. So when you come back, they really get into the debrief about how we could do better, things we did wrong, things we did well, and that's why American fighter pilots are the best in the world. Not me per se, but just as a group, collective group. And I've flown with a bunch of pilots around the world. There's a lot of fantastic pilots in other countries. However, as a whole, the US does a really good job with the debrief portion of flying. This is not a spear at the Air Force or a spear at anybody in the Air Force. I would say regarding debriefing personal life stuff and giving coaching to fighter pilots outside of the aviation environment, I'd say that it lacks. And that was something that I learned in the civilian world from my chief instructor pilot, who was a retired doctor, not a people doctor, but Dr. Bob Wakefield. He would sit down and kind of coach us through, just how to be a better dude, like, how to do things better in life, and so that's something that's really been lacking, which is kind of an easy segue into the why behind starting single seat mindset, right? So we're single seat fighter pilots. Fighter pilots have a unique mindset because we run the show. And if you don't, then you crash or you die or something bad happens, right? So the business single seat mindset, I started that to, kind of coach and guide the current generation of fighter pilots to write stories, write books. There's a blog website, and to give people access to fighter pilots that think fighter pilots are cool, but also to just provide a radically different perspective on life, whether that's business, entrepreneurship, peak performance, athletics, what have you. There's a lot to be learned there. And because we learn stuff at 800, or we're making decisions at over 800 miles an hour, those decision-making skills are very leverageable into high performance professions. So it's kind of probably a little bit more than you wanted to know, but I think that the important thing is that I learned a lot from both sides of the aisle. And now that I'm in the military, having the civilian background and owning businesses, if I've learned anything, business owners, once you start a business, you just want to start another one, and you kind of, you can just leverage those skills. So we're trying to give back. And I think that the last thing I'll say on that is it gives us a lot of purpose, right? Because we're lacking that in today's day and age, where people do this soft quitting or whatever they're calling it, all this garbage that you're seeing nowadays, right? People don't show up. And so people are lacking purpose in their life. And so single seat mindset, we give all the money to a children's cancer nonprofit just to show that our purpose is not, yes, it is a business. We do like more money because it allows us to give more away. But just to make sure that our purpose is aligned with where we're supposed to be going in life, that's what we decided to do.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, yeah. When you have a purpose, you're not the person downplaying and being negative on social media and all that stuff. You're too busy doing what you're supposed to be
Yeah.
doing, right? You're not the troll on the internet when you're living your purpose, right? So there's too many people out there that they don't know that, they don't have it, and they shoot it shows in other ways. So kind of switching gears a little bit, because I think people think about how they're just sitting in that airplane. They don't have to be in good shape or anything like that. Pilots are specimens, man. They're in great shape. So tell me something. Tell me a grueling physical task you had to go through that maybe someone doesn't realize a pilot had to go through.
Yeah. So, I mean, very specifically, physical stuff. I love backcountry powder skiing. Um, it can get a little grueling when you're hiking and you put your skins on and you're hiking up the side of a hill. So that's one of the things there. I'm going to go on a mountain bike ride this afternoon, so I like to mountain bike. But I'd say one of the things that was the most grueling for me um, was when when I don't know when I'm going to eat and then I don't get good sleep. I become a different person. So if you want to talk about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
Oh yeah.
that's an easy way to bring that guy out. Now, granted, um, in my life, about 5 years ago, I was 215 pounds and I was strong like bull, but I was overweight. I was a little bit, I was a thick slice, if you will. Um, so what I changed in my life was, I realized that eating breakfast, brunch, lunch, supper, dinner, snack, maybe having a 1 or 4 glasses of whiskey every day. That's that's not going to bring me to the finish line. So the physical task of essentially going into, basically looking at my diet and going, what can I just stop eating? Right. I think that was the big thing there. So I cut out, it took a little bit of experimenting. It took me about 6 months, but in 6 months, I was able to find, hey, let me cut out breakfast because I can make it to lunch. About 10 a.m., I would start to feel like I was going to vomit because I thought I was so hungry. But after 6 months, I had dropped 10 pounds just from intermittent fasting, right? Just lunch and dinner. And Joe, I was lifting weights. I mean, I've always been strong, but I was just heavy. And I say all that because years ago, my most physically grueling thing that I did was went through, and granted, I think it was more of a mindset thing, right? But I went through um, survival training. So you go through resistance training, which teaches you how to, if you get captured, how to do all that stuff, and they interrogate you and all that. But the other piece of it was they throw you out in the woods, and then you survive essentially. On a couple things for about a week. So, you're trudging through the woods and you're not getting good sleep. And we had 2 or 3 females in our group that had never slept outside before. I mean, we're talking like not even slept out on the trampoline at night to look at the stars. And so, what does that mean? Well, as we're out in the woods and it's cold and we're getting rained on, and another dude in the group has hypothermia, well, and people are sliding down these muddy hills, and we're about 4 or 5 days into this. I'm hungry, I'm freaking tired, and I got to keep it together because I was the officer of the group, so I was like the leader per se, right, or at least the designated leader. So by the time the most grueling thing was by the 6th or 7th day, I can't remember how long we were out in the sticks, but I was so tired. I was so freaking hungry. And we had gotten within a mile of like the rendezvous point to get quote unquote rescued. And it was just pouring rain. And it had been pouring rain for days. And it was cold too, because it was up in Washington State. And we are all in our ponchos, hunkered down, hiding because there's people out looking for us. So we're trying to like escape. And just the day prior, a kid almost died from hypothermia, and they revived him and brought him back to life essentially. And so we're sitting there, and I've got like a little sterno, like a little lighter can thing that I lit underneath my poncho, and I was like, I'm either gonna die from hypothermia or I'm gonna die from huffing these huffing these fumes from this stupid little candle that I got underneath me. But it kept us just warm enough to like hunker down and just last the last couple hours. And honestly, I think, when it comes down to it, single seat mindset is what I'm all about. Like the mindsets is tough, and just sitting there going, I'm sitting perfectly still. I just got to make it another hour, right? And just kind of going through that in my own mind and just telling myself. And then, the negative side of that is stop being a little wimp, right? But then also going, well, am I actually dying? Like, am I
Yeah.
going to die from this? So I'd say, like, long story long, out of all the things that I grew up doing, because I grew up out in the sticks and riding dirt bikes and stuff, but that was tough because I was tired, I was hungry. At the time, I was pretty heavy. I ate a lot of food throughout the day, and it was a mind trick. I think the biggest thing for me there.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I get hangry too, and then if I'm not sleeping on top of it, then that's a recipe for disaster right there. So yeah, yeah, good on you for that, and that's a great mindset to develop. That hey, just get to the next hour. I don't have to make it
Yeah.
the whole day. How about just this next hour? So that's you can tell you're a coach, man. You talk like a coach. So let's just kind of switch it up. You mentioned your nickname was Slice. How did you get your nickname?
Yeah, so I had a pretty close pass with a as a young fighter pilot. I usually you get your call sign, if you will. My name is Slice from doing something stupid, right? And it's usually given to you through we have like a naming ceremony where all of the older fighter pilots, or at least those that have names, they get together, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal because like that call sign, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but hopefully the call sign is a semi decent one and it sticks with you. Um, and you don't do something so stupid that they take the call sign away and give you something else. So mine was from as a young fighter pilot, I had a really close pass, um, essentially dogfighting with another fighter pilot who was the instructor during that day, and I broke a training rule and pointed at his jet too long. We ended up shooting each other, simulated, right? And I don't remember. He probably killed me first because he was much better than I was. But I broke a training rule, and we had a really close pass. Um, and clearly I lived through it. But they said I tried to slice him in half. Um, and I was also in Japan at the time in a U.S. fighter squadron over there, and it was our squadron mascot was a samurai warrior. So like you can think like samurai sword, slice, it kind of all fit the motif. And then yeah, I almost died and sliced the other dude in half.
Hey, Slice is a cool nickname, man. I've heard much worse out of there. That's a
Yeah,
good one. Yeah.
yeah, you and me both.
So, kind of involved in that is, the new Top Gun movie come out. So I just
Sure.
know, even though you're Air Force and it's Navy, people just say, "Hey, you're a fighter pilot." I'm sure you got tons of questions. What are some common questions people have asked you about that movie?
Yeah, so I think the big one is, just kind of the open-ended one. What do you think?
Yeah,
And I think in 30 years, the cinematography of Hollywood has come a long way.
absolutely.
I mean, the uh, part of me is slightly jealous that the Air Force has not done something like that to showcase Air Force pilots, Air Force fighter pilots, right? Because the cinematography is phenomenal. Um, I think that's kind of one of the positives is that it was my wife was even like it was like so close to the old movie. Even the theme and going into the bar and singing the stuff, and I was like, well, yeah. And then there was like the girl that Tom Cruise was involved with, and I'm like, well, yeah, it was kind of a repeat for that. I think they brought in a little bit more of the tactical stuff behind being a fighter pilot, which is cool regarding the actual tactics themselves. Not something that we would have done, like from like a military fighter pilot standpoint, the way that you plan stuff and then execute it. Um, the scenario was pretty far fetched, and just even the part where they go up the hill and then like dive into the hole and then drop their bombs and then like pull a bunch of G's so they don't like hit the hill on the other side. And I'm like, if fighter pilots were like the last thing on earth that could do that mission, okay, cool. But I mean, there are boats and satellites and just other assets that the military would have pulled on. Now, let's say in a vacuum, if they were the only show in town, okay, cool, yeah, that would have been a pretty challenging scenario. Um, and then and then the whole piece of him, I liked it because it was super cheesy and it really brought me back. But when he jumped in the F-14 at the end and took off, like I was like that, it was way, way, way far fetched. Where stuff's blowing up on the runway. The fact that he even got the F-14 to start in the first place was so out in outer space. But I liked it just because it showcased some of the old school fighter jet stuff. All of the circuit breaker panels and all that stuff it's in those old jets. And I've flown jets, older jets like that. that have all of those bells and whistles that are just so archaic compared to, the F-22 and the F-35 and some of the new fighters that we have nowadays.
No, that's really cool, man. That part would be cool to actually see on the inside of one of those. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it for what it was. I like a
Yeah.
good cheesy movie. Tom Cruise is a man. He's still out there doing his own stunts. He's 60 years old, however old he is. It's pretty
Yeah.
impressive. And
Yep.
so let me ask you this: if you had to identify with any of the Top Gun characters, who you most like in those?
Geez, I didn't really connect with really any of them, to be honest. And I know it's probably not what you're looking for. Um, maybe from the first movie, I'm not normally like the guy out in front, like Tom Cruise, that's, you know, in the classroom environment where he's just running his mouth and I don't I don't view myself that way, but like I'm usually the guy like Ice that will maybe rib somebody a little bit for opening their mouth when they shouldn't, and God only knows that I've opened my mouth and said stuff that I shouldn't say a lot before. However, I think like maybe Ice, which
Right?
is ironic because there's our single seat wisdom book series that are 20 chapters each written by a different fighter pilot. The second volume, the first chapter is written by a fighter pilot, and his call sign is Ice.
Oh man, can
Um,
he do the teeth click like Ice used to do
yeah.
back in the first one? That's the best. Oh man, I still
Yep.
use that. You never know when you might need a good teeth click at somebody. So I've used that throughout my life. So good on him for being an Iceman. So you kind of there's a lot of pilots that have to be super smart. They have to have all these characteristics, but there's a lot of people that have those characteristics. What's that? How did you develop your mindset to kind of get to this? That hey, you mentioned kind of some of it earlier. How you just focus on hey, just this next hour. What's some other things that you had to develop to become that pilot?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of thinking about that, and it's a lot of it is we hinted at it before, right? So being overweight for me and being out of shape was because of habits, right? I just had a habit of um, I worked out and I was strong, and in my mind I could eat anything, right? And when I hit 30 years old, the old metabolism shifted gears on me, and I started packing on the weight. And so my habits, I think, are really the crux of the issue, right? And so when I've got something going on in my life that is maybe getting me off track, or not getting me to the not pushing me in the direction, or at least could be refined, I really have to look at my habits, right? And so this is very oversimplified. It still works for me to this day. And where I started was I started choosing to go to bed earlier in the night, right? Because then I wouldn't stay up and have that glass of whiskey. I wouldn't end up, watching a show on Netflix that would eat another hour into my night, or uh, cruising. I've never been super big into social media, but like just flipping through social media and just mindlessly scrolling, or watching the news, which is, I mean, the bad negative stuff is what sells. So like just getting all that out of my mind, right? And it was just a simple habit. I was just chose to go to bed earlier. And whether that's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or an hour, it can make a big difference. And then the next step from that was waking up earlier. And at this time, I only had two kids, but they were, I mean, my daughter, my oldest, she would wake up at freaking 4:45 or 5. So she was up early. So I was like, I got to get up at 4 because I have a real estate business that I'm running. We've got a lot of renovations going on. I'm a full-time fighter pilot. So I started getting up at 4. In order to get up at 4, you have to have your ducks in a row by about 6:30 p.m. to get the house calmed down so that you can jump in bed at 8 and get a good night's sleep. So all that to say, I started going to bed earlier, which allowed me to wake up earlier, more refreshed, clear mind. Um, and then in the early bits of the morning, that's where like the magic started to happen, where I started to get a lot of acceleration in the business. I got a lot of clarity in my own life, because at 4, even if my daughter did wake up at 5, she would usually, I could give her some books or something she could read in my office, and I would crunch out another hour or two of work. And by 7, I got 3 hours of work in, and you multiply that 5 days a week. I mean, you've got like almost 3 extra days of work done. in the early hours of the morning running my side hustle. And I know that you did the same thing, right? Where you're side hustling your business to get it up and running, and you're double tapping, right? Both businesses, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of it may seem very simple, um, but I thought, I had read some books and I had started shifting some things around. And that was kind of the one thing was I went to bed earlier. I got better sleep. My mind was clear. Just not drinking or eating a bag of chips or doing any of that stuff at night, right? Because you're tired and it sounds good and it tastes good. So,
Yeah.
and then in the morning, more specifically, just spending that 5 to 15 minutes in the morning, just in silence, whether that's prayer, meditation, just getting your mindset right. It's kind of what they call it, centering yourself so that you can have your intention set for that day.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing you said right there, if people are listening right now, is you made the choice. You didn't. Someone was keeping you up at night. You chose, hey, I'm going to go to bed early. I'm making this choice because this is what's best for me. It's not the universe is making out of control. Everyone has a choice, right? So I heard this guy Inky Johnson that talk about you're born looking like your mother and father, and you die looking like your choices, right? So we all have these choices we make. That, hey, you can go to bed, you can stay up all night drinking whiskey, or you could go to bed, get a good night's sleep, and go kill it for 3 hours before you even go to work, right? So anyone
Yeah.
out there, you got to make a choice, and it could be like you said, it doesn't have to be an hour early. It could be 5 minutes, and that stuff
Yeah.
it matters, right? Those little choices you make, they're going to matter. So, tell us more about single state mindset. You mentioned it a couple of times. What all do you guys do?
Yeah. So, kind of like leveraging what we just talked about, it's tough to have the right mindset going into the day if you roll out of bed and you are literally sprinting into your day. Um, I did that for so many years and it worked when I was single.
Yeah,
All right. It worked when I was single, but then life tends to layer itself on top. You get married, you start having kids, um, you get a new job, you get more responsibility, you start a business, right? So like there's all of these extra layers that got put on top of me, and sprinting into my day was really destroying um, knowing where I was gonna go because there's too many things going on, right? So to get my mindset right, I'm just kind of establishing, like I had said before, that intentionality or that direction that you were going to take as you started your day. Um, after so that gave me some clarity, and I say that because I had the real estate business going on, and I had another business going on. So I grew up in real estate. My old man owned real estate, so it was kind of something that happened organically for me. I had written a book for my passive investors because we had started buying small apartment communities and renovating them, and it was that was lucrative, and it's going well, and I actually still own that business. But then I also started a second business, which was going to auctions, buying and selling stuff, because I have family members that did that too. And although it was lucrative, it was not fulfilling. It was a lot of work, and I realized that my intentions for that business. Now, being in business, you got to make money, right? One word, the word is money. If you're in business and you're making money, then you have a business. If you're losing money, you have a hobby, or you have a business that's going bankrupt. So the business was running. I didn't lose money on it, but it was not serving a bigger purpose, which was something other than money, the why. Okay. If I had been giving all the money away, that would have given that business some purpose, but I wasn't doing that. So I stopped that business. And how I got to that point was just doing what I had said before. I had gone through a couple of deployments, rocket attacks while you're deployed, like killing people, being all over the world. You add in extended family issues, and then about 6 years ago, I had a big mental breakdown where I called timeout, and the next 6 months were pretty rough. Being in the dark pit of my mind. Whether or not that was all the different words that the counselors used, I don't know. But I'm here now.
yeah,
Like you said before, I made the choice to pull myself up by my bootstraps every day and get back at it. And fast forward, after doing a couple of businesses, shutting one down, we get into COVID. And so our real estate business survived COVID, which was thank God, for that. And then as I'm watching this class of student fighter pilots go through, they're really struggling. And fighter pilots are very social, right? We debrief each other, we hang out in the bar. There's all of the different cliches you see in Top Gun. it's a very social group, right? And we rib each other and we make each other better and all that kind of stuff. Well, they weren't getting that because they're on different schedules, lockdown, blah blah blah. So I started sending all the students a 2-minute little blurb once a week, and really what it was we I've now automated that program because other people started using it outside of fighter pilots, called the Competent Wingman. If you go to singleseatmindset.com and click on the insider circle, you can access that program. But it's basically in 2 to 3 minutes once a week, what's something that you can work on to be a bigger, better version of yourself, whether that's for God, country, family, whatever it happens to be. And the messaging initially was how bad I suck. It was, here's all the things that Slice screwed up as a young fighter pilot. I'm Irish lineage, so I'm pretty spicy. And it was more or less like, hey, I did this, I suck. Here's how you can avoid this in the first place. And here's how you dig yourself out if you get into this trouble, type of thing. So that was kind of the messaging that really connected with the younger students at the time. And then that led me into, I was mountain biking one day, which is where I get all my ideas. I was like, let me start Single Seat Mindset. And it was the worst hobby I ever started because it was so much work. And I asked a bunch of older fighter pilots, I'm like, you're going to retire and go to the airlines or do whatever you're going to do. Like, what's going to happen to your story? Like, let me, I'll put together a book, a compilation of fighter pilot stories. We're going to do, let's shoot for 20. And so I called, texted, emailed, Facebooked as many guys that I could find that I knew. I think I messaged 189 fighter pilots, and we got our first 19 authors, and I wrote a chapter as well. So the Single Seat Wisdom book kind of grew from that. And then since then, that was kind of still a hobby, right? I was helping the students. I'd kind of made a website and done some other things that, I learned in the business world that were not rocket surgery for me. And then people started contacting me, and, business owners and guys that own companies are like, hey, I bought this book and I'm using it. I bought one for my whole team, and we're going one chapter a week for the next 20 weeks. And so that's where it kind of, we've got some acceleration. And that's when I started to turn it into a business. And, we had been supporting all of the fighter pilot authors. When they write their chapter, they don't pay me. I have them pay a children's cancer nonprofit to be a part of the book. Right. So we're up, I think in the first year, we hit 30 grand raised for that cancer nonprofit, which isn't, earth shattering, but I think over time, like it'll accelerate and kind of pick back up. So again, more purpose, but that's kind of the long story to where Single Seat Mindset got its roots, was from my business background, but being a fighter pilot, civilian world kind of all came together. And I saw a pain point, which was like kind of opened and exposed through COVID. And now we have this second business that is, I'm actually looking to hire, I'm interviewing some assistants right now because I don't really care for all of the social media and all that stuff, but I know people use it. So I need to figure out how to get somebody to help me with that.
Cool, man. That's a lot of irons in the fire. You definitely need somebody holding on to a couple of those for you. So, so you had one book, and that wasn't painful enough, so you decided to do another one. Well, tell us about the latest book that's about to come out.
Yeah, Single Seat Wisdom Volume 2. So, if you do something once, I was like, I don't know if that was luck or not. Let's just reopen that wound and and go for some more pain. And so yeah, I think every Veterans Day, we're going to plan on just publishing another volume of fighter pilot stories. I have an old school F4 fighter pilot lined up to write the first chapter in volume 3 already. So people are lining up for it. It's a proven concept. I have, the business processes behind it. I make it easy for the authors to write their story and contribute. So it's been a little bit of a painful learning experience, but it's really cool. And it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where can people get a copy?
So singleseatmindset.com, that's our launch pad. That's where everything is. You can find the Competent Wingman. All our books are on there. There's links to the other websites. There's social media links. All that stuff is there. So singleseatmindset.com. If you live in the US and you're listening to this show, you can go to singleseatmindset.com, put a / and then one word, podcast gift. The first 3 people to sign up, I'll send them a free copy of the wisdom book No questions asked. Completely
Oh man.
free. Ship it to them. I did have somebody in, I think, Malaysia ask, and it was like $82 to ship it to them. And I was like, dude, that one hurts. Let me send you a digital copy.
All right, so y'all
But
pause
yeah,
this right now and go get your copy right now before someone else gets it. So pause it, come back, and finish this episode. So
yeah,
yeah, 82 bucks. That's a little steep, man, to ship a book.
yeah. Singleseatmindset.com, though. That's the hub.
That's awesome, man. Hey, it's been great learning from you, and thank you for your service too. By the way, we appreciate what you're doing out there for us.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Sure,
Appreciate you.
man. Hey, you guys. Hey, go and if you haven't got if you weren't one of the three, you came back and someone already got it. Sorry about that. You need to order the new books coming out on Veterans Day. You said the next one will be out.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. This will be out on November 8th, so that's perfect. So, hey, thanks again so much for tuning in. Thanks for coming on and being a guest, man. Sharing some time with us today.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Hey, you guys go pick up the books, all the copies right now. If you didn't get your free one right there, go to singleseatmindset.com. Check out all the resources on there. So much cool stuff going on over there. Follow them on social media. Hey, Dominic, keep up the good work, man. I'd love to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, y'all have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.